نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Last week we went over the malaika, the angels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The amount of angels there are, we don't know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has an immense amount of angels, and the creation, the amount of them is beyond our very comprehension. So, one of the things which we know from the Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, that the night journey, was that the Prophet ﷺ was taken to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is referred to as Baytul Ma'mur, which is the house in the heavens. And there he met Ibrahim alayhi salam, but also he was informed of many different things, such as the malaika who are inside the Baytul Ma'mur, who are performing sujood from the time of their creation till the time of their destruction. This will be their only purpose. And then there's other malaika who come inside to do tawaf. And these malaika, the first group that came at the time of their creation, they will never get another chance to come in and do tawaf again till the end of creation. Because this is the usul of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the rule He has made. And also at the same time, this is the vastness of the creation of the angels, just the angels. So, this is some small sort of recap from last week about the malaika of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this week we're going over the books of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's the four main books which we know, which is the Tawrat, the Zabur, the Injil, and the Quran. And the Tawrat, the Old Testament, was given to Musa alayhi salam. And we know this, and it was written on tablets, and he used to enforce and teach his people about the Tawrat. And the Tawrat was basically the rules and regulations for the Yahud. Right? This was the rules and regulations that they had to follow the rules to a T. Many times they would try to circumnavigate and make loopholes. The Yahud would try to make loopholes, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would tell them not to play with him. But this was their way. Then the Zabur was revealed to Dawood alayhi salam, the father of Sulaiman alayhi salam. And Dawood alayhi salam had, he used to recite it every day. He had a habit of doing this. And this was the Zabur, the Psalms as they say in English. Then the next book, which is referred to as the New Testament, wa alaykum salam, which is the Injil. And this was revealed to Isa alayhi salam. Right? And the languages of these books, they may be disputed, they may be disagreed upon, but it's most commonly said that obviously the Tawrat was revealed in Hebrew. They say the Psalms or the Zabur was also revealed in Hebrew. And they say that the Injil, that this is what is said, is it was really revealed in, as we say in Urdu, Arabic, Suryani, which is Aramaic, which is technically considered a mix between the Greek language, classical Greek language, the Roman language, the classical Roman language, and Hebrew. And this is what it said was the Injil was revealed to. And then we have obviously our book, which is the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He took an oath in the Quran, Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the protector of the Quran. And today I was watching a video, and there was a Muslim guy. They have this place in England. It's called Speaker's Corner. Many of you might have heard of this. In Speaker's Corner, this brother was talking, and I was telling Brother Omar that this guy reminded me of him. And he was talking with this Yahud, and the guy was challenging him. He's like, why don't you believe in, the Tawrat? He's like, because your book has been changed. He's like, he's like, so you're not Muslim if you don't believe in the Tawrat? He's like, no. I believe in the Tawrat, the Old Testament, in its true form, not in the current form, which has been tampered with and has been changed. So the guy's like, well, what about the Quran? He's like, how can you prove it hasn't been tampered with or changed? He's like, we have an oral tradition where we memorize the Quran, where you can go to a masjid and we'll have a tiny child, maybe 5-6 years old, who has memorized the complete Quran, right? We have an oral tradition. Then we also have written forms. He's like, we have Quran mushafs, which are almost like, 1250, 1300 years old, which you will see them, and there's no change in them, right? Preservation. The concept of preservation. This is why even in the hadith, you have isnad, which is sanad, which is chain of narration. So many of the graduates of Darul Ulooms or universities, Islamic universities, they'll have a chain of narration that they learned it from their teacher, who learned it from their teacher, and it leads all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. That Islam is one of the, most concrete religions when it comes to preservation, right? And so they're having this discussion and disagreement. So the guy's like, oh, well, you don't believe in the Torah, and they're going back and forth. And he's like, okay, fine. Bring me one of your rabbis who's memorized the whole Torah, the Old Testament. He's like, well, that's not possible. It's 2,000 pages. He's like, that's not my problem. That's your problem. He's like, we have preservation. You don't. That's not my problem. So we have preservation in our kitabs. Now, this is one thing which many people don't know, is aside from these books, there were other small books, which are called sahifas, which were revealed to other Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam. And this is where we have to understand that there is a difference between a Nabi, which is a prophet, and a Rasul, which is a messenger. Right? A lot of people, we don't know this. Maybe even I didn't know this many years ago, right? We have to learn these things. And these are not things that we have to be a scholar to know. These are things which we should know as a Muslim, because when we get asked a question and we don't know how to answer it, then a person will ask you the next question, well, how are you still a Muslim if you don't know the answer to these essential building block questions, right? They're going to try to cast doubt in your Iman and Islam. Nothing should cast doubt in your Iman or Islam on a personal level. But this is the job of people, that they try to do this, right? And the shaitan always comes inside of the people's hearts when they're close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He tries to deviate them one way or the other. One of the things which I'll tell you is, when a person is becoming hafiz, many of the hufaz, when they get close to finishing the memorization, what happens is, all of a sudden they'll forget, they know the Quran perfect up until that point. They might know 25 juz, 26 juz. All of a sudden they'll forget 10 of them. Forget doesn't mean they completely forgot them. They have tons of mistakes. Now they have to go through revision. And what happens at this point is many people, they quit tahfiz. They quit completely because they're like, I can't do it anymore. It's too hard. This is the shaitan, you know how they say writer's block. This is the shaitan getting in your mind and giving you memorizer's block. And you're completely like blocked off. And you have to shake it off. When you shake it off, you're fine. But this is the shaitan playing tricks on you. So the shaitan, whenever you get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he'll always play tricks on you. Right? So we have to move back, I'm going to move back to the topic. We have to know the difference between a Nabi and a Rasul. Nabi is a prophet, and a Rasul is a messenger. All messengers were prophets, but not all prophets were messengers. Right? And the messengers, not only did they get books, but they also got rules and regulations, Sharia, with their books. But then there were Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam, such as Adam alayhi salam. He got 10 sahifas, 10 chapters or 10 books. Hazrat Adam, he got 10. Hazrat Sheeth alayhi salam, he got 50 of these books or booklets. Sheeth alayhi salam. Hazrat Idris alayhi salam, he got 30. And Ibrahim alayhi salam, it's not really known exactly how many he got. It said between 10 to 30 were revealed to him. Most of these books were revealed in one go, the rules and regulations and everything, but the Quran was revealed over a period of 23 years. 23 years. And you have to understand the way that the rules and regulations came down, that if, this is a very common topic of discussion, that the prohibition on alcohol came at a later time. This was not the first thing that came. Right? It wasn't the first revelation is, oh Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tell everybody that drinking alcohol is forbidden. First thing that comes down. Right? Now if somebody becomes Muslim, what is the first thing, we tell them is like, oh, okay, alhamdulillah, you're Muslim, you gotta pray and everything. You can't drink, you can't gamble, you can't do this, you can't do that. We start telling them all the things they can't do, and immediately they're like, oh man, I became a Muslim. How hard is this gonna be now? Because for a lot of people, it's a lifestyle. Every day after work they go home, and what did they say? They crack open a cold one or something, right? Yeah. So this is the lifestyle in the country. So we have to understand that we have to, even if somebody converts to Islam, we have to kindly explain it to them that, hey, you should refrain from it. If we use harsh wording, a lot of times people get driven away. The ulama from Pakistan, they explain to people, if they're coming to America especially, they're like, don't use words like kafir. When you're talking to somebody who's not a Muslim, call them a non-Muslim. Because nobody's going to contend with the fact that they're a Muslim if they're not a Muslim, right? But if you call them a kafir or disbeliever immediately, it's like a strike all of a sudden. So you don't use words like that. So there's wisdom from, our ulama, and then there's wisdom from our Anbiya alayhi salatu salam, the Sahaba, the Tabi'in, Tabi'in. So this is why we look at their lives. So we look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ, then we look at the Quran and how it was revealed, and how everybody brought the Quran into their lives, lesson by lesson, time by time. That when the verses came that the prohibition of alcohol, streets of Medina were filled with alcohol because everybody was getting rid of their alcohol. They're like, we're done. We don't want to drink this anymore. So the Quran was revealed over a period of 23 years. It's been memorized since the time of the Prophet ﷺ by tons and tons of people. Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu was a hafiz of the Quran. Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu was a hafiz of the Quran. There were so many Sahaba. There was one war where a whole troop of the Hufaz were part of this troop, and they all became shaheed. And this is when the preservation of the Quran was taken even more seriously. Now the question comes up that when were these other books revealed? Now we don't have anything from Quranic sources, but we look at the sources of the Yahud and the Nasara, that what do they say? And these are not things which take our iman up or down, so we just look at them as a historical context, that so it is said that Musa alayhi salam revealed the Torah, or he was around approximately 1200 years before Isa alayhi salam. 1200 years before Isa alayhi salam. So we would say 2000 right now, 2023, whatever, but say 2000 and 1200 before that. So Musa alayhi salam got the Torah approximately 3200 years ago from today, right? Something along those lines. When was the Zabur or the Psalms? When did Dawood alayhi salam get those? So it is said that it was maybe between 200 to 400 years after Musa alayhi salam. So, right? Which says approximately 800 to 900 years before Isa alayhi salam, before Jesus. So that is the timeline for that. And then obviously the Injil came, and then the Prophet ﷺ came approximately 600 or so years after Isa alayhi salam. Now there is something which is called a phantom time theory. This is something interesting. I was reading about this the other day. I shared it with a brother who himself is a convert. His name is Tyler. I was talking with him. And phantom time theory says the time period between 614 to 930 doesn't exist. That this is just a concoction. It wasn't real. And so as we were talking, Tyler's like, it's like they're trying to completely negate the Prophet ﷺ, because that's when he was around, between 610 to 633. So, there's many efforts made to, disprove Islam, to disprove the Prophet ﷺ, things like this. And, we have to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has taken the oath of protection of this deen, this Quran, and everything unto Himself. Where, I might have memorized the Quran, that's a blessing to me by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but I'm not doing any favors to this deen by having memorized it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did a favor to me by bestowing an opportunity to me to memorize it. And for others who come to the masjid, we're lucky Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invites us, because this is His house. So anytime we get an opportunity to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or to recite the Quran, we really have to thank Him, because we may have been misguided. We may have been on the wrong path. And who knows which direction we would have, went in life. So, one of the things is we have to, acknowledge and, understand that our deen of Islam is really a blessing for each and every one of us. And the compilation of the Quran, and having it so easy to have the whole Mus'haf in our hands, having translations, having transliterations for those who can't read, and having tafasir, which is the explanation of the Quran available inside of our phones, we're really lucky. And if we don't take advantage of it, even if we have all of these resources, we're doing a disservice to ourselves. Right? So, as I said before, all of the Nabis were sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but all of the Rasuls were Nabis, but not all Nabis were Rasuls. We know that our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the seal and the finality of prophethood. And one session we had yesterday, inshallah, we'll wrap up in 5 minutes. We had an online session with a brother. He's from Baltimore. He's a ustad, he's a teacher. And the question which we were going over was the age of Aisha radiallahu anha when she got married. And this is, in the modern day, in the modern age, this is sort of like a a discussion or a disagreement, and people try to levy accusations against Islam and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam because of his marriage to Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha. And one of the things which we as Muslims, we should be very comfortable in being confident that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't do anything wrong by marrying Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha. We can't judge Islam by what secularism is wanting to teach us, and we can't judge Islam by what the modern barometer for the age of getting married is. Right? Marriage has always been a concept of traditions, family, tribe, region. It was never supposed to be the job of the state or the government to sort of look over it. It's never been the case. Up until recently, where, about 20 years ago when it was decided that the states would even lose power to the federal government of who decides what marriage is in this country itself. So we should be very confident in the character of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the Quraysh, the kuffar of the Quraysh, the disbelievers of the Quraysh didn't levy a single accusation against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam upon his marriage to Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha. The hypocrites of Medina didn't levy a single accusation against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam over his marriage to Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha. The Yahud of Medina didn't levy a single accusation against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the other kingdoms, the Romans or the Byzantinians as we say, and the Persians, they didn't levy. They were the enemies of Islam. But they didn't levy a single accusation against the Prophet ﷺ that he did something wrong. All of these enemies were trying to disprove the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Sufyan, before he became Muslim, he could have levied this accusation. Radiallahu anhu. Abu Jahl. Anybody you can say that, they could have levied these accusations. But they didn't. Because they knew there was nothing wrong with this. It's, we live in a modern day, the concepts of marriage and things like that, and even how people conceptualize marriage and how people mature towards marriage, everything has changed, right? Everything has changed. We're not talking about that. But there's nothing wrong with what the Prophet ﷺ did. So when we look at a Nabi, we look at the characteristics, the akhlaq, the mannerisms. We look at all of these things. It's a complete picture. So this is why if I don't know how many of you guys know about a group called the Qadianis. The Qadianis, they're called Ahmadis or Qadianis. They are a created sect which originated in India in a place called Qadian. They believe in another prophet after the Prophet ﷺ. And so one of the things which the ulama of Pakistan and India tell them that when you look at a prophet, you look at his characteristics, right? You look at his character. You look at Musa alayhi salam. You look at Musa alayhi salam, at how, he got to marry his wife, how he was helping those two young girls out. He was being very kind. He was being very modest. He wasn't trying to, make any moves or anything like that. This is what you look at for an Nabi, right? You look at the Prophet ﷺ with Hazrat Khadija. The Prophet ﷺ, you look at his life, rarely, or you may never find the fact that he proposed marriage to a woman unto his own accord. It was usually, suggested by someone else, so much so that Hazrat Khadija radiallahu anha wanted to marry the Prophet ﷺ. Not the other way around. The Prophet ﷺ was working for her. He didn't look, oh, hey, I want to marry this lady, she's rich. She wanted to marry him. You look at the characteristics of our Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam. So when you look at Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, na'udhu billah, who says he was a prophet, you look at his characteristics. He wasn't somebody who was pious. He wasn't somebody who used to pray. He wasn't somebody, who was learned like that. Nothing like that. You look at his life. There was no qualities or no qualifications which proved that he was even a good person. They say that he would commit, in money, he would misappropriate funds and things like this. And, is a prophet somebody who can misappropriate funds? No, obviously not. So this is why when we look at our Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam, our prophets and our messengers, we see the truthful qualities. We see honesty. We see integrity. And this is why, if they say that they got a book and they got the Sharia from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to believe it. Right? But at the same time, we know that Musa alayhi salam got the book, it got tampered with, it got changed. The Injil, it definitely, we know it's gotten changed. We know the Zabur, the Psalms, they got changed. All of these books, they got changed. This is why we're so strong in the preservation of the Quran. And this is why our ummah, we love the Hufaz, the memorizers of the Quran, because we know that this is one of the ways which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is preserving the Quran. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq, may He give us a better understanding. And inshallah next week we'll go over the Ashara Mubashara, the 10 who were promised Jannah. That there were 10 Sahaba who amongst their lifetime, within their lifetime they were promised or given the glad tidings of Jannah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.